These are unusual times, but spookily good times, it seems to me, to be talking about new ways of thinking about the role and place of the news, the way it's gathered, collated and communicated. Maybe even a time for a new paradigm or two. Who would have ever thought that talk of new paradigms would have made it to the headlines and 10-second news grabs? But for the past week or so, that's been the phrase of the moment, even if it has been an unfamiliar word from an unlikely source. The letter writers, I don't know in the Age, but certainly in the Sydney Morning Herald, have been very exercised about all this talk of paradigm shifts, wittily engaging with the incongruity of a bloke in a big hat using such a pointy-headed term. But as I said, these are unusual times that challenge many of our presumptions. It may say something about the caricatures that we have about blokes from the bush, that it comes as rather a confusing shock that paradigm change talk should come so effortlessly from Bob Catter's tongue. Isn't he a hick, a throwback, a bit of a buffoon, a parody of an Aussie cowboy? Why is he, of all people, suggesting that it's time to think beyond a party system that evolved, as he quite correctly noted, in the 19th century, when we are now in the 21st or something, as he said? The system has served us well, but he's quite right. We are in the midst of a paradigm change. We're seeing the signs of this change all around us, and we don't really know where it's heading, in politics or in the media. But there is something going on, and the uncertainty around the formation of a new federal government is in some ways emblematic of it, it seems to me, a product of this state of flux. John Keane, the Professor of Politics at Sydney University, who's been exciting the Q&A Twitterati with his wild hair and rather wordy responses, suggested in his big book, The Life and Death of Democracy, that the era of representative democracy has been gradually giving way over the last 50 years or so to a new era of monitory democracy, where many competing and complementary agencies are keeping tabs on the system, checking power and acting as watchdogs. In this new era, these roles are no longer comfortably or willingly handed over to the political parties, the elected representatives or the media. An educated and well-informed citizenry expects to be involved and actually knows quite a lot. The Twitterers on Q&A on the ABC demonstrate this with amusing clarity every Monday night. Indeed, I suspect that for all the talk of the campaign over the last month or so being dumbed down to win the support of that handful of undecided voters in a few marginal seats, what the election has actually revealed is just how smart the electorate really is. Those who want to be disengaged from the political process will, of course, find their own ways to do so. It appears that there may be more than 1 million people who are not enrolled in the Australian electoral system. In many cases, not because they missed an impossible and what turned out to be unconstitutional deadline, but because they're disconnected from the process. They consider it remote and irrelevant. Then there are those who chose to vote informally, a substantial proportion in some electorates, where Mark Latham's cynical and disaffected message really resonated. But both these groups are a cause for concern and need further attention, but should not distract us from the reality of our civic-minded polity. We are really the envy of many countries. It says a lot that programs like Ruin Nation and the recent Chaser manifestation, Yes We Can, should attract such huge audiences. But in a way, they're the icing on the cake of a very sophisticated and quite wide-reaching political discussion. It points to the fact that most people have been taking politics very seriously and using the information that they glean to make quite shrewd decisions. This was clear in the disappointed response to the slide away from the urgency of acting on climate change, and in the collective emotional intelligence that I think was on display following the removal of Prime Minister Rudd. The people knew instinctively that seemed to elude the assassins, that face-saving is essential to smooth transitions. The collective outcome now that we're dealing with, in terms of a divided parliament, putting the outcome in the hands of several archetypal Aussie blokes, says a lot about the uncertainty we collectively feel about the best way forward in unusual times. This does not feel to me like the bitter divisions that we see evident in the United States with the red states and the blue states and the Tea Partiers and the others. It feels to me like an evolutionary step to an uncertain future. There's been quite a lot of talk about the need to reform the political process by these archetypal blokes to whom we've delegated the responsibility of deciding the new government. Interesting that they have all made comments, throwaway lines, grumbles and a few harsh words about the role of the media in this process. Bob Catter sniped that it was time to take him seriously, While Rob Oakeshott has complained about the dirt mongering by some of the tabloids in his electorate, or who come into his electorate, Tony Windsor archly described the role of partisan pen pushers. On her last day before the actual election, Julia Gillard, her last appearance in the press club before the election, Julia Gillard pleaded with the gallery that what was at stake was more than a game, a comment that she repeated again when she was at the press club earlier in the week. On Monday night in Q&A, former Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser castigated News Limited for its self-interested and hostile approach to the Labor government. And Tony Abbott has tried very hard, and quite successfully, not to offend anyone. It's not appropriate for the politicians who are negotiating what the new parliament might look like to be prescribing changes in the media system. But we're kidding ourselves if we don't recognise that the need for a new paradigm extends to the media as well as party politics. What do we think should be the new rules of engagement of the media in this world? At a simple level, formalising the rules around the debates in future election campaigns could be one building block. And I don't think the debates as we've done them in the past, where you had a sort of, they're not really a debate, they're an extended interview, is probably the right way of doing it. But taking this out of the hands of party officials to say yes or no, that there is something more at stake, that there is a role that needs to be played for these sort of formal processes in an election campaign. And I'd like to see new ways emerging how that might be done. If we're serious about the media's role in the political process, surely this should be one of the reforms on the table. But no one seems to be advocating it, and we are more comfortable, and I think we in the media are probably more comfortable as observers than accepting the responsibility that comes with playing a more active role, which really in the end is what makes this vocation so addictive. There is a need for some new ways of thinking and acting. Unfortunately, there are a bundle of new tools sitting there waiting to be deployed. Meg has referred to some in her comments at the beginning, and no doubt we'll hear more of it over the next couple of days. There's been so much talk in recent years about the need for new business models for journalism that we've forgotten, I think, to concentrate on what we are best at. That is public sense-making, reporting and interpreting the news, getting to the mood of the times, the complex fabric of life that undergirds the events that erupt on the surface. We've become much better at the events and less good at the underlying stuff. Who would have thought, for instance, this talk that Catherine and the others have been involved in of a paradigm change in the structure of politics was actually even on the agenda. I mean, there'd been no discussion of it before this started to pop out after the election campaign, or after the election results were in. Either we'll all be caught up in something that's not of our making, trailing along behind the audience and the newsmakers, or we can seek to apply the lessons of decades and more than decades, arguably centuries, of professional skill in crafting a new way of doing journalism. The election campaign, I think, demonstrated this with quite striking clarity. The acuity of the campaign reached a new level. The reporters on the buses at the whim and mercy of the campaign organisers were treated as quote harvesters, sort of as stenographers. They worked the shallow scene with as much professional integrity as they could, but much of the time it appeared to be demeaning work. Little wonder that the sport of Mark Latham's bomb throwing provided a welcome, if really meaningless, distraction, and dominated the headlines for days and days. The high points, it seems to me, were those moments when the audience of electors became involved. The News Limited sponsored town hall meetings, $50 a head for an undecided voter to ask their questions. The Q&A sessions on the ABC, where leaders could provide answers that lasted for more than 30 seconds and try and explain some of the context and some of the complexity of the issues that they and we are facing. These forums, I think, were especially revealing, but the reports the following day, the news reports the following day, tended to play to the gags, the slip-ups, rather than the bigger picture that was revealed. Because of my position on the ABC board, lots of people contacted me to comment on things that they like and dislike about the ABC. And it was striking to me that after these public forums, both Q&A and the others, that a lot of people contacted me to say that they felt the reporting of the next day of what was transpired at those hearings actually missed the bigger picture, that they were hearing about the game, not about the substance. Now, this may be inevitable, but just as these forums are now a possibility, technologically enabled, technology has also provided other ways of reporting, of making sense of issues, of engaging with and drawing on the audience, but also of engaging with and drawing on the vast amount of information which is gathered, collated and stored in huge numbers of disparate places. It seems to me it's not enough to be passive in response to these changes, or to be preoccupied with finding the business model. That's not really our strength. There's a need for for leadership, for media professionals to bring their insights to the process of reporting, storytelling and news gathering, to build a more informed and nuanced relationship with the audience, which we now know so much more about. To reassert the best of our role in public life, to reclaim the fourth estate role by looking forward to new ways of learning from the public, new ways of using the tools that technology has provided, while remembering the old lessons of storytelling and understanding what makes people tick with empathy and insight and bringing that to life. If the public is dissatisfied with the political parties and with the nature of much political reporting, it's up to us to reinvent it, to forge a new relationship, to find out what it is that people are wanting, to find new ways of giving it to them, not leaving it to the political parties to choose the tune and decide who is dancing. We have a huge range of tools now. There is more knowledge than ever before about the interests, preoccupations and concerns of the public. There's more knowledge and information available to be gathered and harvested about the processes and actions of government, public and private enterprises. It's our responsibility, it seems to me, to address these concerns that the audience has, to unpack them, and to use the information which is available to find their causes and solutions, to dig beyond the obvious, to seek out the patterns, to find a path through the complexity. Instead, we all too often find ourselves parroting the cut-down lines, the ideologically shaped rhetoric, the untruths and misstatements, the overstatement that is meant to address fundamental concerns, but is generally simplistic nonsense that everyone sees straight through and breeds with cynicism. Doing this is hard and will require some original thinking. It will require taking risks and going into unknown territory. Already the attitude towards audiences is changing, but the need for a new relationship is going to be hard, more complex and difficult, an iterative process as a new paradigm emerges. More than a decade ago when I wrote Reviving the Fourth Estate, I argued that if the best traditions of journalism were to be realised into the future, journalists themselves would need to find new ways of respectfully relating to their audiences, not as ciphers or partisan snipers, but as public sense makers. It seems to me that we now have the tools to do this that were in a way that were unimaginable even a decade ago. We can gather and collate complex data to find patterns and make sense of complexity. We can engage directly with our audiences and learn from them. It seems to me that the big stories now are less about the sort of simple goodies and baddies, but trying to understand the flaws in complex systems and see where that leads to in terms of outcomes. It seems to me that we as media professionals can provide leadership and bring the skills of weighing competing claims, analysis and storytelling to make sense of these uncertain times. Or we can be stenographers, recycling manufactured lines and dealing ourselves out of the game, becoming bystanders, ciphers, chasing a catch-up of a fast-moving mob, playing catch-up with a fast-moving mob. I don't think that this is a new paradigm that we want to aspire to, this catch-up with a fast-moving mob. But unless we seek to be masters of our own destiny, to apply the hard-won skills of information gathering, analysis and storytelling, to find new ways of adding value to the information-rich world, this could be what our future holds. I don't think this is inevitable. The public has demonstrated that they are smart and have high expectations. There's a lot of disappointment abroad at the moment. But this is our time to invent a new way of doing journalism that rises above the disappointment and provides a way of helping people make sense of these unusual and uncertain times, maybe even a new paradigm.